I want to go to Venezuela and I want to talk to Marco Batista. And let me give you a little bit of background. He's a Venezuelan-born staff member with Students for Liberty. He's studying economics and mathematics in the United States. His family fled Venezuela following the rise of Hugo Chavez, like a lot of people did. When the commies and the socialists come in, a lot of people run for their lives. That is part of history. You saw it in Cuba. You've seen it across the globe. But he focuses on economic systems, political institutions, and he's connected to the young people, Students for Liberty. And I want to know how the Venezuelan young people, who in America, we see a lot of young people move towards socialism. Not all. There's a lot of people that move to the right with MAGA. But I think he's going to give us, Marcos will give us what it's like in Venezuela today, what he's seen, what are they thinking, and where we're going. Marcos, welcome to my show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Marcos, it's great to have you. I want to ask you the first question I wanted to ask you. What was life like before? And maybe you had to learn this from your parents and your grandparents, and that history was passed to you. Maybe you were a child when you left, I'm not sure. But under Chavez and Maduro, how did the country change?
Well, what I can say is that before Chavez, Venezuela was actually the wealthiest country in Latin America, and that was due to its massive oil sector with the largest reserves in the world. They went from the richest country to the poorest today, right? And so you see that change start to happen in '98 with Chavez coming to power on a socialist platform. You see him filling the oil companies with party loyalists, expropriating property, changing the constitution, sacking strategic savings funds for untenable social spending. And,
so,
that leads.
Let me ask you.
Yeah,
let me ask you a question on that. So, when you say the oil industry is a complicated business, I'm sure it's you need qualified people to run it. So, what happened under Chavez and Maduro? They just start bringing in like politicos to fill very important technical positions in the oil industry. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. I mean, you see oil production fall from a peak of 3 million barrels per year to 700,000 barrels per year under these regimes. It's just a complete disaster to have the largest oil reserves in the world and to be producing under 1 million barrels a year.
So when you break the back of the economy in Venezuela, you break the back of the people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you see after this, you actually see a little bit of prosperity under Chavez. You see poverty reduction on paper, but that's buoyed by the massive oil prices at the time. I don't know if you remember in 2008, oil was at $140 a barrel.
Yeah.
And so after that, oil prices collapse, and obviously you have no backup because your production has collapsed. And you see the government start to do some shady things like trading in drugs and letting in American adversaries to try and buoy their economy. And you see people starving at this time when oil prices drop.
Marcos, my next question is the China Belt and Road Initiatives, just for the listeners. That's where China goes into countries where there's things aren't going well. The people are abused by a dictator. China's Belt and Road is to go in there, loan money, help build ports and infrastructure, and kind of infiltrate into these countries. Now, with Venezuela, my understanding is you had the Chinese there, you had the Russians there, you had the Iranians there, you had all the access of evil jumping into the daily life, never mind all the Cubans. But all these left-wing, dangerous countries infiltrated Venezuela. Do I have that right?
That's correct. And you could actually say that this all started with Cuba. You could see Chavez's election as Cuba's political invasion of Venezuela, and that's where all the rest of the dangerous regimes infiltrated. Once Chavez came into power, you see countries like China, like Russia, like Iran coming in. I mean, China controls all of the precious metal mining in Venezuela. Iran has drone factories 1,200 miles from the shores of the U.S. Russia has over 120 troops in Venezuela. You just really see a lot of adversaries doing operations there. You see Hezbollah presence in Venezuela, Venezuela giving passports to Hezbollah members to try and skirt sanctions.
Here's another thing I wanted to ask you, which I found as an interesting statistic after you just kind of lined out how entrenched that these different countries were. But my understanding is the Cubans had 5,000 to 10,000 security officers for Maduro, and they also ran the intelligence. So I guess they would go assist with locking up any dissidents in Venezuela. And when the Delta Force from the United States Army raided the place, they killed 32 security guys who were all Cuban. Is that correct, or was that just a narrative in the press?
No, that's exactly right. And it's actually incredible that that was admitted live, because this is something that we've all suspected for years, the Venezuelan opposition and Venezuelan dissidents, and was dismissed by the regime and by Cubans to be some sort of conspiracy theory. But they've gone out and said it, that 32 officers were killed in that raid on January 3rd.
I find that, and I thought, okay, 32, maybe they're like specialized private bodyguards, but then you hear they had, I don't know, somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 security officers down there, and their whole job was to keep the Venezuelans in line and keep Maduro in power. That would be my assumption.
That's exactly right. I mean, they had security forces that had been trained from the time of the USSR. So they're using these tactics that have been used since the communists in the 20th century to try and control the population there in Venezuela. They have these torture tactics that they use. They have these intelligence tactics to spy on people, and it's a complete state of fear down there due to these Cuban officers.
My question, when you heard the United States had went in and taken Maduro out, what was your first reaction?
Well, I couldn't believe it, to be honest with you, but my second reaction was celebration, absolute celebration. I mean, 8 million people have fled that country. There's 8 million people living abroad, and I think every single one of them celebrated that day alongside me.
And what I found interesting, and I'll be political here, is the Democrats were weeping. How unusual is that? The Democrats were whining, complaining, and weeping that Trump went in there and took Maduro out. Meanwhile, the Venezuelans were celebrating. You want to comment on that?
Well, that's to me, honestly, that's expected, because when something doesn't line up with their narrative, then it's completely in their interest to weep and whine and talk about international law and the rights of Venezuelans. And where were they when in 2017 we had hundreds of protesters killed on the streets by these Venezuelans and these Cubans? Where were they when we have hundreds of Venezuelans jailed and tortured in the Helicoide in Caracas? Where were they in 2024 when Maduro stole the elections, right? Maduro stole the elections in 2024. He was never a legitimate president since then. You had the opposition winning 67% of the vote by independently certified tallies. We actually had a student, I would like to shout out, Cesar Baez was a student there in Venezuela who was able to decode these voting tallies and help prove that fraud. So the Democrats don't like to talk about when it doesn't benefit them. They don't like to talk about international law when they don't care about it. So I find it really, really ironic.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Democratic Party does in the United States definitely has a problem with America first. And a strong Venezuela aligned with America, I feel is good for the whole Western Hemisphere. It's good for the Venezuelan people, as we've seen them celebrating. And Marcos, I want to thank you. We got to go to break, but you gave us a great perspective. I'd like to keep bringing you back on because you're spot on. And I think it's good when voices who are connected to Venezuela come on and tell us exactly what's going on down there.